This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jensen. This show is always live, of course, and it's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, we're also streaming live on YouTube right now, and the whole show is available on demand later on our YouTube channel. Now today, well, we get reaction from Parliament after yet another chaotic sitting in the House there yesterday. 1 in 4 South Africans do not have enough to eat. And our question of the day needs your thoughts on this shocking statistics. At SABC Newsroom, that's where you answer that question. We look at new technology to deal with the scourge of shack fires here in South Africa. In our book slot, we look at social cohesion with Israel and Kizi. The Curry Cup kicks off around the country tomorrow. Richard Newton will give us an update on that. And we close with a live performance by Bongani MP. His latest track is called Bayede. But first, a look at the day's news with Anine Domal.
Good morning, I'm Anine Domal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. ANC Chief Whip Stone Sizani says the EFF is free to approach the courts if it's dissatisfied with the President's response to its question on the Nkandla project. Yesterday, the EFF said it would not rest until President Jacob Zuma complied with Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's recommendations. According to Madonsela's report, President Zuma unduly benefited from the upgrades at his Nkandla home. Meanwhile, Parliament's ad hoc committee on Nkandla has adopted a report by Police Minister Nathi Nhleko. The report exonerates President Jacob Zuma from paying back any money for non-security upgrades at his private home. Members of the committee deliberated on whether a draft report by opposition parties should be considered, but this was rejected. Following nearly 2 months of working on its report, the parties announced they would not be able to agree on the matter. President Jacob Zuma has encouraged members of the ANC Women's League to unite. He addressed the league's national conference in Irene, southeast of Pretoria. The conference has seen signs of tension, with the league split support for Angie Motshekga and Bathabile Lamini for the top post.
We don't seem to be making our modern ANC better than the ANC of the old, the way we approach things. In other words, we meet today, unlike the Makhatus and John Dubes, not to look at the issues, but to look at our friends.
The case of the former community radio station DJ Donald Sebulai will resume in the South Gauteng High Court sitting in Palm Ridge today. The 38-year-old is accused of stabbing his girlfriend Dolly Chabalala to death. This week he made a brief appearance in the court before the matter was postponed. And a 5.6 magnitude earthquake has struck the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo this morning. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake didn't hit far from the border with Rwanda. Well, we'll keep you posted on that story. Remember, to find all of these stories, you can follow us on Facebook. Just search for SABC Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Yevon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anine. Parliament's ad hoc committee on Nkandla has adopted a report by Police Minister Nathi Nhleko exonerating President Jacob Zuma from paying back any money for non-security upgrades at his private home. Members of the committee deliberated for 2 hours on whether a draft report by opposition parties should be considered. The committee also rejected a draft report by opposition parties. Parties compiled their own draft recommending that a report by Police Minister Nathi Nhleko on upgrades to the President's private home be rejected. In the latest developments, the EFF has says they'll approach the Constitutional Court to force President Zuma to comply with the remedial action suggested by the Public Protector. Now, our very own man, Mandalisi Dubasi, was in Parliament yesterday. He joins us from our studio in Parliament. Very good morning to you, Mandalisi. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Evan.
Mandalisi, it wasn't as hectic, some say, as expected yesterday, but just give Give us your reaction to yesterday's sitting in the House.
It depends, yeah, Ben, which way are you looking at it? I mean, I'm looking at it this way. I mean, if you look at it based on previous parliaments since 1994, then it was absolutely chaotic, with unnecessarily points of orders coming left, right, and center. Even some members even threatening to strip if the Speaker of Parliament bring in the protection services. In that sense, it was very chaotic. But if you look at it based on the current parliament, then you'd say it was not bad at all, because, I mean, nobody came in to remove Parliament. But what was even extraordinary was the patience that was shown by the Speaker of Parliament. I mean, it was unusual. She was unusually patient. I don't know whether it is because, on one hand, there is this case against in the Cape High Court that was launched by opposition parties, whereby they wanted to be removed from the chair because they believe that she's not partial in that chair. Maybe that is one thing. But if I'm correct to suggest that maybe she thought about that as she was sitting in that seat yesterday, then the question would be that should the court of law maybe be approached to bring sanity in the House? Maybe that's the question maybe we should look at right now.
Talking about that point of the court of law, the Constitutional Court was mentioned yesterday by EFF leader Julius Malema. He's talking about taking their arguments there. Firstly, do you think this is a constitutional matter?
Well, first of all, I think procedurally, they need to go first to the Supreme Court of Appeal. That's what the Democratic Alliance and other parties are going to do. They are waiting for the case, unfortunately, of the SABC, which they took there to test the powers of these Chapter 9 institutions, especially the public protector. If her reports are mere recommendations, or, are reports that has to be taken seriously and applied. That's what the DA is testing with this court of Mr. Mutwening vis-a-vis the DA. If they succeed, then they will take this one to the court, also to the Supreme Court of Appeal. But the EFF, as you rightly said initially, they are taking it straight to the Constitutional Court. We have to see if this matter will stand in the Constitutional Court or it will be referred to the Supreme Court of Appeal.
Now, Manalisi, today, of course, the ad hoc committee is expected to submit a final report on Nkandla. What's your expectation around that?
Sorry, Evan, just come again. I got you lost there.
The final report on Nkandla by the ad hoc committee is expected to be put forward today. What's your expectation of that?
Well, Evan, once again, I mean, the opposition parties have made it clear, and in this one, they all see, in one eye that they are not going to accept it. They don't want that report. They believe that it is based on the report of the Minister of Police, Minister Nathi Nhleko, and they believe that Minister Nathi Nhleko's report was illegitimate and irrational. So they are going to reject it. But as you know, that the ANC is in the majority. Obviously, there will come a point where it has to go to the vote, and the ANC will vote it through, and then it will be all the way to the courts of law once again.
Maralisi, were you a little bit surprised by the demeanour of political parties yesterday? Some say that the EFF was a little bit becalmed.
Not necessarily, but yes, on the other hand, in the sense that, I would say President Zuma tried to answer this question of Nkandla. And by the time it came, it was quite late after the debates. I mean, after all other questions were exhausted. So I expected that. I don't think we will see the normal theatrical, events that we used to see in the past events when the president is here.
Thank you very much, Manalisi Dubasi, coming to you live from Parliament, giving us an update after a chaotic sitting there yesterday. Of course, there's also a report to be filed today. But let's stop with the politicking and deal with something that, well, some say threatens our nation. 1 in 4 people in South Africa do not have enough to eat, and half the population is at risk of hunger, despite the country producing more than enough food. This is according to a report by Oxfam, and it's titled Hidden Hunger in South Africa. According to the report, low incomes, rising costs, a lack of access to productive resources and climate change are amongst the reasons causing 13 million people to go to bed hungry. The report also uncovered that women are more likely to go hungry than men. And this is due to differences in income, cultural practices that put them last or allow them smaller portions when food is in short supply. From Oxfam this morning, we are joined by Nokutula Mane, who is the Economics Justice Campaign's advisor. Very good morning to you, my dear. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a very alarming report, isn't it?
It is. The statistics are quite stark. To imagine that in a country that produces enough calories to feed its nation, we have people who go to bed hungry. And more than half of the population is at risk of going hungry. And 1 in 4 people have to face hunger on a regular basis.
Why is it, if we're producing enough within the borders of our country, that we see this amount of hunger then?
Well, it points to a lot of issues. The first issue is most South Africans depend on the retailers as a source of food. And so most people don't grow their own food, they have to go to the shop. And in order to go to the shop, you need money. And in some cases, we find that retailers sometimes inflate their prices, making it difficult for low-income households to actually be able to buy the food or to get enough food that actually will make them food secure. In some cases, our study actually found that low-income communities spend 50% of their income on food.
How do we overcome that? How do we communicate that we need to change these habits then?
Well, it's an issue of inequality. South Africa is an unequal society, and what actually happens is that the Gini coefficient of South Africa is actually higher than it was at the time of democracy, which means that the richer are getting richer and the poorer are getting poorer. And so the inequality needs to be addressed, whether it be income inequality, whether it be inequality with regards to access of food. All those issues need to be addressed. We call, for example, now there are discussions around the minimum wage, and those discussions need to be concluded so that millions of South Africans who get less than 3,000 rand or even less than that are able to afford the breadbasket.
Now we see within our agricultural sector, we see issues of drought and the like, and we see that they're trying to attract younger people into that sector. How does that play out? Is that an element within the chain?
Well, yes. Unfortunately, we find that over 90% of South Africa's agriculture is produced by commercial farmers. Although there is a large number of smallholder farmers, they do not produce enough to feed the nation. And so there's a general lack of investment in agriculture. And we find that some of the people who are farming are growing old, and the younger people are not finding it. They view agriculture as a dirty job. But agriculture is only part of the solution. And as I've already mentioned, that it's about dealing with the whole value chain. It's also about dealing with big business, about retailers, which are the point of access for food. So if we deal with agriculture on its own, we're not going to solve the problem.
In layman's terms, what are some of the factors that we often overlook here in South Africa when we deal with hunger?
Well, as I've already mentioned, there's the issue of incomes. The incomes issue needs to be addressed. There's the issue of holding big business, including retailers, to account. We find that, for example, now the government of South Africa gazetted a national food security policy, which completely exempts big business from any accountability at all. And it's because of that that we continue to see this cycle of food insecurity continue. In fact, recent statistics actually indicate that from last year's 26%, we've actually gone up to 26.2%. And some people are attributing it to the fact that the population is now at almost 55 million. But still, it's worrying that the trend we're going in is not the right trend. And so issue of incomes, issue of access to food, whether it be through big business or through other means, needs to be addressed.
It's certainly very concerning. The numbers don't look good, especially if, within the context of where we are. The positives that came out of the report, were there any?
Well, what we found was that women have an inherent capacity to actually cope. People have been enacting different coping mechanisms in order to deal with hunger. So people are not sitting back and going hungry. And what we've actually found is that in the end, what we find is the hidden hunger. And we've called it hidden hunger because we don't see graphic pictures like those we see coming out of the Horn of Africa. But it is still there. And women are at the forefront of fighting food insecurity and making sure that their families are fed, whether it be through agriculture, through innovative means of generating income. And so there is an inherent capacity within South Africans to be able to cope, but that needs to be supported by an enabling policy environment across all sectors.
There's the old axiom that says, you know, daddy gets the big piece of chicken. Is that part of the problem that we have also in South Africa with regards to women and feeding families?
Yes, so that is, cultural issues are part of the problem. In some parts we find that the men get the bigger piece, or they get fed first.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's when there is a shortage of food, it's usually the women who choose to go hungry so that they can feed their families. And so it is because of this caretaker role that women play and with the cultural issues that we find that women are more vulnerable to hunger. And yes, so it is part of the problem. But what we need to do is not that we need to make somebody else's sacrificial lamb, but we need to solve the issue of food insecurity, because it's not right that 20 years after democracy, we still find there are people still going hungry in a nation that produces plenty.
Absolutely. It's very concerning, this report. Of course, our question of the day is regards to this. 1 in 4 South Africans do not have enough to eat. There it is. We want your thoughts on this. Did you even think like that? Do you even know that is what's happening in our country? Yeah. Next time, Daddy, you take the big piece of chicken, you have to think about what you're doing. Thank you very much for doing that. From Oxfam, Nogutula Menge, telling us the cold facts here on Newsroom this morning. Now let's just move on and take a look at the picture of the day that we normally put up. This, of course, is at the ANC Women's League conference. There you'll see ZANU-PF welcome at the conference. Of course, caused quite a stir when it was announced that Grace Mugabe would be gracing the conference, but all the liberation movements in Southern Africa were well invited to the Women's League conference. Now let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe. We start in China. The South China Morning Post reports that distraught family members of passengers, the missing MH370 flight, staged another protest in Beijing yesterday outside the building where they were due to meet representatives of Malaysia Airlines. Then in New York, the International New York Times says political leaders, aging survivors and ordinary citizens gathered yesterday to mark the moment the bomb was dropped. This to commemorate Hiroshima's 70th anniversary. Also in New York, the Wall Street Journal says Donald Trump turned the first Republican presidential debate into a raucous brawl, refusing to say he would support the eventual nominee if he doesn't win. Then sparring with several of the other contenders and setting a contentious tone for the evening. Let's take a look at what's happening around South Africa. Here in Johannesburg, former DJ Donald Sebolai, who's accused of killing his girlfriend, is expected to continue testifying in his trial. He's accused of stabbing his girlfriend in Soweto in their flat in June of last year. North in Polokwane, 2 councillors are expected to appear in the Modimolle Magistrates Court on charges of fraud, following an allegation that they sold RDP houses already belonging to people. And in Cape Town, the bail application of Seskona People's Rights Movement leader Andile Lili will be heard today. Lili was arrested a week ago after he encouraged his supporters to go out and kill criminals. Very interesting case, that one. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. Welcome back. This is Newsroom. Now, it takes less than 2 minutes for a shack fire to destroy a home. And the past 5 years, on average, there's been at least 10 shack fires in the country, leaving one person dead every time. A company in Cape Town might have found a solution to the country's shack fires. Transception established the Kuseleikaya project with the aim to prevent rapid spreading shack fires through the use of a specially formulated fire retardant spray. Paint, that is, applied to informal dwellings. The paint is water-based and eco-friendly and has received the global green tag certification that makes it conducive to the, well, international green marketplace. Now, from our studios in Cape Town, we are joined by Justin Zitzman, who's the CEO of Transception, the business who put forward the paint. Good morning to you, Justin. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you, Eben.
Justin, just tell us what inspired you at Kuseleikaya project to come up with this initiative.
Well, Eben, I'm quite passionate about the fact of seeing people based in informal settlements, living in their homes and then reading the newspaper and picking it up and seeing that, there's another shack fire that has occurred. And, nothing seems to be done on that level. It always seems to be rather a reactive situation than a proactive situation. So what we did was we went and developed a paint which we thought could assist with the prevention of shack fires. Because as you know, the loss of life and the loss of house means quite a lot of expenses for different municipalities and for the city of Cape Town.
Justin, Cape Townians in general, are they as passionate about people dying in shack fires in the townships as they are about fynbos burning on the mountain?
Well, that's a very interesting question that you ask. On Mandela Day, I would think that I was convinced that we had a drive over there where we invited people out from the city to come and join us because we identified a community called Vakebeki, which is in the Nomzamo informal settlement. And we had more than 250 volunteers, and these people were just walking through the community, and they were painting, and it was such a jovial day. I really think that the people and the city is definitely on board now. And after yesterday's test that we've done at Epping Fire Services, we have now officially got the buy-in from the city of Cape Town as well.
Tell me about this paint. It's eco-friendly, which makes it quite interesting, and it's water-based, so it's quite a nice mix. The technical specs of it.
That is correct. Yes, I mean we were specifically looking for paint that is eco-friendly, is low VO, and it's eco-friendly and it's not harmful to animals and harmful to people. So this paint it's a water-based paint, and what it does is it's fire resistant or fire retardant, and it's intumescent. The fire retardant purposes of what it basically does, it blows the carbon dioxide, gives off and kills the flames, and also then the intumescent is a carbon layer that forms so that when the fire heats onto the heat, it forms a carbon layer, and then all that happens is the fire just dies down from there.
How is it going to be rolled out? You say you're talking to the city now. How is it going to be rolled out? And what's the kind of cost that we're looking at? I find normally these kind of products, it can be quite expensive.
That is correct, yes. What is going to happen from here is the report is now going to be given from fire services from the engine chief, and it's going to be given to JP Smith. And then what we will be doing is we'll be sitting down with the MACO committee within the next month, within the next week or two. And what's going to happen then is we're going to have to give a presentation and say that, look, we know that there's other initiatives like with the solar gas stoves or solar heaters or solar lights. And we've then got to say why our initiative works better than the other initiatives that is out there, which we don't really have an issue with. So what we would like to do is to say is that where we are currently sitting at right now is we'd like to work with government, but we'd like to do the beautification aspect with this as well, where we say we're going to be painting the roofscapes. We've partnered up with Heart 104.9 FM as our media partner for our event at Mandela Day. So what we're going to be doing is currently we now have got 34 people in Vakebeki community painting the roof, and then we'll be painting the red art there on. So our appeal is also to speak to any corporate like a Vodacom or MTN or SABC or anybody is that we'd like to make the beautification of the roof aspects, and then we can also give the city some money back as well then, because that's the most important thing. It all boils down to price at the end of the day. The cost of it we're talking about is between $1,000 and $1,500 per informal home. The paint normally costs between $3,500 and $5,000 for 20 litres, so it's the price that we've managed to bring down.
Justin, thank you for joining us. We could talk about this a whole lot more, but unfortunately we've run out of time. It's a fantastic initiative and it's much needed. I always argue with the guys in Cape Town, when the shacks burn, you should be as passionate as you are when the faintforce burns, because people actually lose their lives. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you very much. Justin Zitzman,
thank you very much,
who is... who heads up the Kuselikaya project in Cape Town, and they've come up with this fire retardant spray that's going to, make it a lot less dangerous in winter to live in an informal settlement, especially in Cape Town, where we see every year dozens of people die in shack fires. We move on, as we always do. How can South Africans work better together in order to improve the country? That is the question that economic and political analyst Israel Mkhize discusses in his latest book, and it's titled Social Cohesion. In order to achieve this ideal, we need to understand the diverse political, historical, cultural and religious backgrounds that South Africans come from. In his book, Israel questions the role that these aspects play in our everyday life. Now, joining us in studio is the man himself, Israel Mkhize, who wrote the book around social cohesion. It's a book that I feel is much needed in South Africa and needs a lot of people to read it. Good morning, Israel. Thanks for joining us on the Friday.
Thanks for having me.
You're always here to talk about politics, but now I want to talk to you about social cohesion. Right. We see the governmental programs, we see the pronouncements on it. I see your book. Where are we as a nation as regards to the fabric of us coming together?
Well, the first thing is that we need to use correct terminologies as society, because you find that sometimes we use terminologies to describe ideal things, but you find that those terminologies are pretty exclusive and encouraging the social disunity. For instance, when we do some of economic measurements of the well-being of society, we use very advanced numerical instruments. Sometimes we call them quantitative or quantification instruments, and use numbers. But human beings are not numbers. You know, there is more to understanding and analyzing what makes society, what makes people come together, and what makes them happy. And there's been a buzzword in society on this question of social cohesion and so on. But then what I did in this book, I went down to say, can we go on the latent and underground issues that could either assist or impede this social cohesion to happen? For instance, what I've noticed as the first thing is that we think that sometimes social cohesion is to bring together to militate, for instance, against the Group Areas Act, and then to bring together people from different races. But what you find is that sometimes social discohesion is actually happening intra-races, within the same races, as people are moving and gravitating more towards what I call high-end utility relations, where it depends what I get from you and so on.
So the haves and the have-nots, the poverty, unemployment and inequality is the problem that we face when we talk about social cohesion and what you call the disconnect. How does class still divide us here in South Africa?
Very interesting question. We first came across the class question, which would move along the racial question. For instance, coming from the slave era, if you read a document in 1752 by Willie Leach on how to make a slave, it was a class analysis of white master owner of means of production and blacks who were slaves and the labor class. But right now, things have changed. You know, you've got a lot of black people now who have entered into a certain level of elite in terms of economic relations to modes of production and means of production. So you find that there has been a reconfiguration of class definition, that now class can even be inside the same races. Even in township, you go to Soweto, you find that there's people who are doing very, very well, and at the same time, right in Soweto, who may not be doing so well. So class has been reconfigured to not only be coded around racial divide. So there is a need, as I've said before, of a new sociology, because there I go to question the notion of intra-race racism, where I say, because of my class orientation, perhaps as a black man, let me use an example, and I find that I'm aspiring to a certain class within a certain race, then I move and I gravitate towards more that class in terms of my demographic location, in terms of work and so on. And now I find that I'm more comfortable to relate with a particular race which is in my class than even my own race, which is what we see. So that's what has divided, actually diluted the class and social cohesion question, because what you also find is that there's this new class of buffer zone, which is called buffer zone, where you find that I'm black and I'm very much affluent. I'm now in between the former established so-called white bourgeoisie and the people who look exactly like me. So when they want to critique capitalism and how capitalism is exploiting them and dividing society, you find that in their critique, they no longer start from the race question, but it's on the resource question.
On the resource question. What about religion? It's a topic that I find very interesting in this context, because where it should be bringing people together, often it seems to have the opposite effect.
That's quite correct. There's a saying which says, religion to the masses is taken as true. To the middle class is taken as a tool for buffer zone. But to the elite, it is taken as a tool to master the entire population. You find that religion itself, it drives on two elements. Number one, there is that experiential, existential element of religion where we feel, where we worship and so on. But again, on the other hand, there is an element of religion being used as a phenomenon or as a psychological proposition, where you think of theology, psychology, and philosophy being used in that fashion. So Africa, if you read a very important article which was written by Max Weber, looking at Protestant and capitalism, how these two, industrial revolution and as well as, on the other hand, religious reformation in Europe, how they went hand in hand, particularly descending down to the so-called third world. Now what you find is that religion was used as a midwife for ill things like imperialism and colonialism. Hence you find that people like Karl Marx says religion is the opium of the people. So they are looking at religion not necessarily in its experiential mode of how people experience God and so on, but mostly how class issues intervene within the religious question.
Talk about religion finally. What about religion in the African continent? We see the rise of all these charismatic churches, commercial religion and the like. Are we abnormally religious in Africa?
Well, it's very interesting, because we say that the West brought religion, these new churches with pianos and so on, to us, but now in the West, churches are closed. Africa, they're open, people are eating snakes, people are doing all sorts of things. I think it's just that self-will or wish to express yourself or to identify with a deity that people have, and the natural inclination of human beings to have something to believe in. Unfortunately, in Africa, we have not wanted to identify religion with reason. We think that the issues of the space of religion, the sacred, is illogical. There's no certain logic that can be used there, scientific approach and so on, to verify or falsify claims and so forth. So I think that's where Africa needs to go back to say, are the religious things out of the terrain of falsification and verification when it comes to assessment?
Israel, thank you for joining us. We've run out of time. It's a topic that I would like to talk about a lot more, but unfortunately we've got other stuff that we've got to move on. Read the book. It's a fantastic book. It's written by Israel Mkhize, and it's called Social Cohesion. It's a question that South Africa and Africa have to come to terms with in the next century if we are going to be successful and build the kind of lasting, peaceful continent that will be prosperous and that will look after all of our children.
Website, israelmkhize.com.
IsraelMkhize.com, he says. There's your punt. You get your punt also. IsraelMkhize.com. I want to have a .com on the end of my name one day. Anyhow, President Jacob Zuma last night addressed the ANC Women's League National Conference in Irene, and he emphasized the importance of unity within the league. Yeah, some of your thoughts on that process. Safa Zimbo says, see the comradesses in the ANC Women's League Conference as well disciplined as the kids at the ANC Youth League Conference. Peasants, Safa Zimbo, that is a little bit harsh, to be honest. Masikole Galeni says, my choice is Comrade Batabile Dlamini. Talking about the elective conference. Yes, of course, it's about electing new leaders at this conference. Loser says, Naledi Pando asked Tehila whether ANC Women's League elective conference delegation wasn't taking the female cause back by doing the substitution sign. There are lots of singing and dancing and substitution signs and the like. This is the way that we do our business in South Africa. Let's take a look at our tweet of the day. Oh, this one comes from Dr. Richard Null. No man succeeds without a good woman behind him. I would say next to him, sir. Wife or mother, if it is both, he is twice blessed indeed. No man succeeds without a good woman next to him, Dr. Richard. Let's get it right. This is the 21st century, sir. But that is a very poignant, I say a very poignant tweet. Now, let's take a look at what is on our Newsroom Facebook page today. Parliament's ad hoc committee on Nkandla has adopted the report by Police Minister Nathi Nhleko that President Jacob Zuma does not have to pay back any money for security upgrades at his home. In his report, Nhleko found that all the upgrades were necessary for security, and persistent cultural and social cohesion programs will go a long way in deterring potential tensions between the people in the Southern African Development Community region. And Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff's approval rating remains at rock bottom, while a growing number of people want to see her impeached and few think she will see the end of her term. Seen that one before. For more, go to Newsroom on Facebook in the SABC Newsroom in the search bar, and we'll pop up. Like the page. Go there, like the page, and we'll send you all the updates as they go. Time to take another break. See you shortly.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. ANC Chief Whip Stone Sizani says the EFF is free to approach the courts if it's dissatisfied with the president's response to its question on the Nkandla project. Yesterday, the EFF said it would not rest until President Jacob Zuma complied with Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's recommendations. Meanwhile, Parliament's ad hoc committee on Nkandla has adopted a report by Police Minister Nathi Nhleko. The report exonerates President Jacob Zuma from paying back any money for non-security upgrades at his private home. And President Jacob Zuma has encouraged members of the ANC Women's League to unite. He addressed the league's national conference in Irene, southeast of Pretoria. The conference has seen signs of tension, with the league's split support for Angie Motshekga and Bathabile Lamini for the top post. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for SABC Newsroom. You can also find us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anine. Now, tens of thousands of people, music, food and drink, road closures all over the country, bright colours and plenty of passion. All this on offer in Bloemfontein as the City of Roses gears up for what promises to be a weekend to remember. Well, for rugby fans, anyhow. It's Currie Cup time. To find out what it's all about, we're joined by our very own specialist correspondent, Richard Newton, a man who's just finished the Ironman, by the way. Big ups to Richard for that, for doing the toughest event in all of sport. Morning, Richard.
Good morning, Eben. Welcome to Bloemfontein. Yes, you're 100% right. It's Currie Cup season, but in Bloem it's a little bit more special than that today. We're looking at coming in with a new coach. Franco Smith has been at the helm of the Cheetahs from the end of the Super Rugby. You'll remember the last couple of games. We've got a whole host of new and really exciting players coming in. It's a reunion weekend. A lot of former players from all over the country and further afield coming back to where it all started for them. And of course, it's 120th anniversary of Free State Rugby. It's a massive weekend, and to top it all, the Free State Rugby Union, together with the sponsors, have thrown the stadium open. They've given away over 40,000 tickets free of charge, and they expect the place to be packed. It'll be the first time in 8 years that this has happened. Atmosphere is going to be amazing, and it looks like it's going to be a great sporting weekend. Of course, playing against the Bulls, traditional rivals. We'll remember we gave them a tad of a hiding at the end of the Super Rugby season. They'll be coming back to try and spoil the party here because of that, I'm sure. Led by a former Free Stater, Lapis Labuschagne. All to do, all excitement coming here. With me at the moment, I have Rory Duncan, who's the director of rugby here. And he was saying to me just now that this is the first game of the Currie Cup, but in Bloemfontein, it feels like a final. Rory, what's the atmosphere like?
Well, Richard, first of all, thanks very much for being here, and thanks for joining us on our 120-year anniversary. Yeah, as you said, the feeling in the stadium is like it's a final. You know, over 40,000 tickets gone. You know, the atmosphere and you know, amongst the players, it feels a bit like our 2000 to 2007 era when we won the Currie Cup. There's a hang of a vibe amongst the players, and not just amongst the players. I think amongst most of the people in the city.
And of course, new coach, new players, a lot of expectations. The idea is get the fans back in and play some brilliant rugby.
Absolutely. You know, Franco's come in with a new brand of rugby. I think we saw it in the last 2 games of the Super Rugby. What I can promise the people is some extremely entertaining rugby on Saturday.
Thank you very much for that, Roy. Eben, we talk about Free State Rugby. We know that apart from all the Free State fans, all the Cheetah fans, most of the guys, yourself included, are also closeted Cheetah fans and will support the Cheetahs when they play against anyone else except, I think, in your case, the Lions. But it's going to be a great weekend. It's going to be a great season. And the idea is to get the fans back, to make it a family atmosphere, to get all the supporters cheering for the Cheetahs again. And as we said, new coach, new players. It looks like it's going to be a great season. Back to you, Eben.
Richard, before I let you go, just tell me quickly, you know, the Free State, you guys have always played the best brand of rugby. It's now us here, the Lions, that play that all-action style of rugby. Are they going back to the old Cheetahs way of playing the game?
Well, I'll tell you, Eben, I was chatting to some of the players last night, and yeah, the Lions have taken on that mantle of playing great running rugby as well, but this is where it started, and I've been told by players and insiders that that's not going to change here in the Free State. We're going to see some of the most beautiful running rugby and winning rugby that you could hope to see. And for all the Cheetah fans out there, it's going to be an awesome season. Keep your eye on the Cheetahs. Keep your eye on some of these youngsters coming out. We've got a World Cup year. A lot of the big guys are out. A lot of the big guys have left. But we've got enough talented youngsters coming through. And I think we're going to see some brilliant rugby. Eben, spend some time tomorrow while you're preparing for the Springbok game. Keep an eye on this game.
I want to, on a personal note quickly, man, I want to ask you, I'm so impressed by the fact that you did the Ironman in the last week. Tell me about that experience, because I mean it's the toughest thing a human being can do.
Yeah, thanks, Eben. It really was, and this is the first time that the Ironman was hosted in Durban. We went down there. The sea was enormous, terrifying, not as easy as we thought it would be. The bike ride was great. The run was great. Durban did a really great job of hosting it, but it is tough, and a lot of practice went in before. Like any sport, what you get out is what you put in, and really worth it. And I'm looking forward to the next one. Eben, I believe you will be getting some training in and perhaps joining me for that one.
I'm on the bike at the moment, Richard, but I can't run just yet. I'm talking to my doctor. Hopefully next year, Richard, baby steps. Richard Newton, specialist correspondent.
Great stuff. Looking forward to it, Eben.
Coming to you live from Bloemfontein, talking about the excitement that's building there in the City of Roses. Of course, they love their rugby there. They love their sport. It's going to be a fantastic weekend there. If you're around, 40,000 free tickets. What a wonderful gesture by the local union there. Of course, just quickly, yesterday, the new National Assembly rules that seek to deal with disruptions in the chamber, that's the National Assembly, were not tested in Parliament, as we all expected. But we did ask you what your thoughts were on these new rules, and this is what you have to say. Let's have a look. Now, Clarence Henderson says, at SABC Newsroom, does it mean when opposition parties demand answers on leg Q questions, then get strong-armed, they become unruly, laugh behind our backs? Well, I think unruly behavior is kind of clear. Oscar says, as SABC Newsroom, I would agree if the presiding officers were unbiased. Unfortunately, they are very biased and unfair to the opposition. Well, who decides that? Ronnie Ledwaba says, SABC Newsroom, asking someone when will he pay the money, is that unruly? Those are meant to be silent if to speak the truth. Okay, speak to pay back the M. Ronnie, what can I say? Not much. Sorry, Ronnie. You have to write words. I'm from the old school. Don't quite understand the texting language that's out now. But it's Friday, and we all love a Friday. So to lighten up the mood, we have a live performance for you. Bongani MP is in studio today to perform his latest single called I Still Remember You. Take it away, Bongani. Take us into the weekend.
Soleni la pagini